So I've just published a new book. Hey everyone, this is James from Rowing Books. So today, for a non-Tolkien related video, I wanted to talk to you about a little new book I just published. I'm super excited to share it with you all, so let's jump straight into it. Most of you know by now that I'm a keen reader and admirer of poetry. I'm somewhat of an avid follower of the poetic style that emerged from Romanticism. William Blake, Shelley, Coleridge, the sophisticated delicacy of Wordsworth, and other poetic styles too, the timeless majesty of Tennyson, a bit of Whitman as well, the sublime beauty of Khalil Gibran's verses. Then, of course, the war poets, Wilfred Owen, Brooke, Sassoon. But to be honest, not so much this sudden emergence of a new poetic style, this insta-poetry craze, for instance. Let me explain. This is very much a subjective viewpoint, and I'm quite open to being convinced otherwise. But these brief lines, these half-finished sentences that speak about the obvious, feel like an illusion, a facade, a deep dive into the superficial. A, pardon the word, synthetic style to the real beauty and meaning of poetry. Don't get me wrong, I think some examples of these so-called poems manage to convey quite thought-provoking messages in such a short amount of words. That's art in itself, I think, but I don't consider it as poetry as such. And for a long time, I wanted to create something that I could call my own collection of poetry. The subject would be deep, complex, and best explained through writing verse, with what I feel are the proper characteristics of a poem: meter, rhyme, structure. Then came the long, exciting period of working on Hastings, this 4,000-line epic fantasy poem on the fall of Anglo-Saxon England. Hastings was such a massive undertaking for me, and one that I'm extremely proud of. But after that, I found myself wanting to explore and try out other poetic styles of a much less lengthy disposition. But at the same time, I wanted to explore a more complex and metaphysical subject nonetheless. For a long time, a couple of years actually, well before Hastings was conceived, I was thinking about time and the creation of time. I started to think about the act of writing and detailing the process of this writing being written. And the possibility of compiling a book that described itself being written came about. I had a few concepts floating around in my head, brief snatches, fragments, a verse here and there of what I wanted to say, or at least what I wanted to attempt to say. So I bought myself a blank notebook and sat down to write. My desire to write this sort of meta-narrative of a book was fueled by the seemingly random and almost unreasoned approach to many insta-poems. I wanted my own poetry to hark back to the Romantics, to have a clear-cut framework and organized layout, especially if it would be dealing with the concept of time. I began to lay the structure of the book's content. I knew I wanted to write a series of sonnets in which the work would reflect certain motifs of time, chronology, sequences, balance, symmetry. Bit by bit, I began to craft a verse and then two. Concepts began to emerge, and ideas and opinions on how I interpret and view time started to pour into what I was writing. What I find lacking in insta-poetry, and again this is just a personal opinion, is the lack of musicality, of tonality in the writing. I was adamant I wanted to write well-structured, well-thought-out stanzas and entire poems. Days became weeks, weeks became months, and bit by bit I came close to completing my book. And that's what Anarchy for the Innocents is, in essence. It is a poetry book about its own poetry being created and eventually destroyed. It talks about life, order, chaos, but most of all it is about time and space, hence the suggestive subtitle, Crafting a Poetic Universe. People have asked me about the title of this book, why Anarchy for the Innocents? It's a title that came to me quite a few years back and somehow just stuck. I think it was about 11 years ago now when these 4 words came to me during a writing spree. I loved the contrast between them and knew I had to use them somewhere, but I never figured out where until this time. And what better way to name a book about time than by referring to something that is so complex and incomprehensible to us human beings? We are, in essence, the innocents trying to understand and make sense of the mysteries and chaotic anarchy of time. And through the magical properties of Amazon's KDP platform, the book is now available for print on demand, with the complete 58 pages of the book, which include 24 poems and several illustrations that complement the poems themselves. Fair warning, it's not a light read. It's almost a philosophical book in a way, meant to intrigue, inspire, evoke, and ultimately to encourage debate and discussion with fellow readers. The structure of the book is purposely very symmetrical. It is split into 2 and traverses the concept of the creation and destruction of time over 24 poems. 24 poems, 24 hours. These poems alternate between sonnets and lyrical lays. There's also a haiku and some experimental style poetry too, but always maintaining a very rigid and symmetrical structure, rhyme and rhythm and meter. There's no hint of a blank or free verse anywhere. It is an ordered, very mechanical piece, as time should rightly be conveyed after all. But it hopefully manages to pierce through the dense grammar and syntax and reach into the emotional and metaphysical. So this is the book right here. As you can see, this particular copy is an author-proof version, and I wanted to read to you 1 or 2 poems from this collection. As already explained, the idea is for the book to begin before the beginning of time and space, and how the creation of time leads to the creation of the first poem in the book. The book is pretty much serving as the universe and reality within which these poems exist. So here goes one of the first pieces, entitled Void. In timeless void, no sigh nor song disturbs the deep silence. No cold nor warmth the darkness strains, no breath upsets the balance. A supple stream of consciousness, subtle then seeps and spikes, until the fertile void gives birth and the first second strikes. There are also poems that are less serious in nature, but no less complex to bring out the element of time. One such poem plays on the classical philosophical concept of the liar's paradox, in which the claim that this sentence is false leads to an infinite recursive reply of true-false. This short poem is made of lies. No truth this lyric tells, but if these lies it speaks in guise, then truth it truly spells. If true it be this line's unreal, then false it is instead. Yet if the lie a lie conceal, in truth it must be read. Although it was an intense struggle to write this book, I'm immensely proud of it, mostly because it was something that had been on my mind for quite a while, and now having actually managed to convey my thoughts and ideas and reasonings into a physical, readable experience is something beyond words, ironically. This little book here feels a part of me, an extension of my mind and soul. It literally feels like I've extracted this out of my brain and giving it to you. And I'm so excited for people to read and share their own ideas on the book, and to let me know what you guys think. So that's all from me today. I invite you to consider acquiring a copy of Anarchy for the Innocent so we can discuss together, debate together the concepts of time and space as they're laid out in these 24 short poems. As always, guys, thanks a lot for watching. In the meantime, like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!